Welcome to For and Against, the show where we argue the merits and the faults of an album released this week.
And this week we discuss the debut album by the fantastically named Beabadoobee.
You're going to have to excuse me, but I tend to get very suspicious when I hear a lot of hype surrounding a young singer-songwriter, and wow, does Beabadoobee come packed with accolades from every last standing music media outlet, to the point where it almost hinders her street cred. When was it ever cool to get heads up from a mainstream backslapping institution like the Brit Awards or the BBC? DIY fanzines printed on recycled paper with a readership of 20 broke souls who know their P's and Q's. That's where you want your name printed. But I must say, upon a bit of research, yes, I did find her preposterous name enthusiastically celebrated in the digital equivalent of them high school rags. So I guess I misfired, like a cross-eyed sniper, easily distracted by the little squiggly things in our eyes.
Misfire you did, because Beabadoobee is taking on all these people on very much her own ground. She is her own person and she is a brilliant person. So, do you want to hear my theory of Beabadoobee? The grand unified theory? Okay, Beabadoobee appeals to everyone. She appeals to young people because she's very TikTokable. She appeals to adolescents because there is a very believable kind of angst in her music. And she appeals to, shall we say, the older crowd, because she reminds us all of our glory days back in the 90s when we were listening to The Breeders and Veruca Salt. We are talking indie pop, but we are talking how to make indie pop that is relevant in 2020 in the age of trap and COVID and all of that nonsense. How do you do it? You write very believable songs, you record them very nicely, and you build up your own little Beabadoobee world. I, frankly, very much in favour.
When you actually sit down and listen to the music, it is very good. I mean, if she was my flatmate or my sister or my daughter, I'd swear she's the greatest songwriter alive. But I am neither of these things. I am a jaded reviewer who likes Enya, Hall & Oates, Julio Iglesias. You know, real adult-oriented music made to listen while I water my geraniums. I struggle to find a moment for Beabadoobee to soundtrack my life without seeming a bit pathetic. I mean, she has officially said, and I quote, it's a record for girls to cry to and dance to and to get angry to. It's all about, like, how annoying it is to be a girl. I'd hate to be mistaken for that suspicious-looking man at the back of a concert watching a gaggle of teenage girls losing their minds. You know the ones, wearing large beige overcoats with their arms concealed at a BTS show. I think it's not the best, really, for men of a certain age to... Or I think it's best for a man of a certain age to withhold from sharing any praise for an artist who is so closely tied to the female teenage experience.
It hit me off my stride a little bit there with your mention of people doing despicable things at a BTS concert, which I like to think no one would ever do. But you talked about this being a record for young girls. I'm sure it is. If I were a young girl, I'm sure I'd like it, but I'm not a young girl, as you may have noticed. I am a middle-aged man, and I feel sad. I feel angry from times, and this is an album that displays those emotions, but it doesn't do it in an artless way. She is a brilliant songwriter. Some of her lyrics display touches genuinely of genius, comparing her boyfriend to the last seat on a packed train. What a lovely image that was. And when was the last time you came across someone who could do this so well in the guitar world, where everyone's just far too clever these days? Just let your emotions out and bathe them in a lovely bit of violin, bathe them in some grungy guitars. Remind me of Pavement, and I am a very happy man, and I am not a young girl.
Look, I was a teenager in the 90s, right? So any young urchin claiming to do their part to save guitar music earns points in my book of point keeping. Just like people who do their bit to save bees, whales, and any mammal really. The poor bastards deserve any help they can get nowadays. But having said that, the 90s, okay, she's clearly grown up in the kind of household I would love to be invited to for tea if she cites Elliott Smith, Daniel Johnston, Mazzy Star, and Pavement as the music she heard in her wee years. I mean, her mother has fantastic musical taste, or her father, I don't know which of the two. But I do get a bit nervous when I hear her talk about bringing back the G word, right? Because I lived through grunge, and it pretty much died when Kurt Cobain pulled the trigger. Yet, All the dirge that came out in its wake is like a bad curse out of a Necronomicon that should never, ever be summoned for the good of all of humankind. Think Bush, think Candlebox, think Toad the Wet Sprocket. No, 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 no. Sixpence None the Richer, though, maybe yes. But of course, I know the kind of grunge he means. But we've still got to be careful, because sometimes people confuse the eras and end up making a kerfuffle out of it all, like adding Coca-Cola to lemon curd, because if you can put a lemon wedge in a glass of Coca-Cola, why can't you do it the other way round? It doesn't work both ways, I'm afraid.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned Sixpence None the Richer. I don't know if you've read up on this. I don't know if you're well informed as to your resource, but that was the first song she learned to play on the guitar. Did you?
I've got my game then.
And the very second song was Coffee, which then went on to become a massive TikTok hit, which I mentioned before, when some fellow sort of remixed it into some modern musical style. But do you know what shone through? What shone through was the feeling of that emotion. How talented must you be to sit down with acoustics? Oh, you're right, your first ever song, and it's a kind of emotion, the kind of melody that appeals to millions. Now, I'm glad you brought up Bush. You might have thought this was an argument against, but no, I'm glad, because I'm going to take Bush and I'm going to run with it. She is the anti-Bush. She takes Bush and she scrubs Bush from history. She is the shub, maybe, with the anti-Bush.
The shrub! Shrub pop!
The shrub Bush no longer exists, and it's thanks to Beabadoobee.
Well, thankfully, her music sounds like the kind of indie grunge that Liz Phair, Julianne Hatfield 3 or Veruca Salt would get lumped in with. But upon closer listen, you can see why she also elicits the memory of Alanis Morissette, and in my case, a dash of Avril Lavigne, which isn't the worst thing if you think the lyrics, he was a skater boy, she said see you later boy, he wasn't good enough for her, hold up to anything written by Polly Jean Harvey.
Well, I'm glad we are at least in some kind of agreement. I'm very much for this album. I think it's an absolutely brilliant work. It's one of my most refreshing albums of the year. It's going to be going on in the car, and at least my wife will be happy, even if the children complain.
What did you think of the album? How about you grace us with your vision on our comment section below this video? And if you want to hear any more of Ben and I's ramblings, please tune in to the weekly review every week on RPS, also known as Radio Primavera Sound.